The screen flickers as the video begins, capturing the dim glow of a flashlight sweeping over a narrow hallway. The walls, once white, are now a faded green, peeling at the edges. Dark cracks snake through the surface like veins beneath fragile skin. The wooden floor groans beneath cautious footsteps, each sound amplified in the silence. The YouTuber adjusts his grip on the camera, his voice carrying forced excitement. All right, guys, this is it. The legendary doorless house. The place no one escapes. Let's prove them wrong. He turns the camera toward himself, forcing a smirk. His eyes betray a flicker of hesitation. Flipping the camera back, he scans the hallway. Something feels off. The usual night sounds, crickets, distant cars, the rustling of trees are gone. The silence is absolute, suffocating. He laughs nervously. Yeah, okay, it's kinda creepy. But it's just a house, right? The corridor seems longer than before. His footsteps echo strangely, almost swallowed by the air itself. At last, he reaches the entrance. The door is cracked and splintered, its rusted hinges barely holding it upright. Black moss clings to the wood. The scent of damp decay lingers. He hesitates before reaching out. The door swings open before he touches it. The sudden movement makes him recoil. He lets out a breath, forcing another chuckle. All right. Went. Just went. Raising the camera, he peers inside. The room beyond is a vast, dust-coated parlor. Furniture sits beneath thick, heavy sheets. Tall mirrors lean against the walls, their surfaces blackened with age. The light from his flashlight barely reflects off them. Something about the space feels wrong. His grip tightens. All right, let's do this. He steps inside. A snap echoes. The camera flickers. His flashlight wavers. He turns. The door is gone. His breathing turns ragged. He moves toward the spot where the exit should be, his hands pressing against the wall. Smooth, cold, solid. No seams, no hinges, no way out. His pulse quickens. No. The door was right here. He slams his fists against the wall. The sound barely registers. It's as if the space itself is swallowing the noise. He spins, the camera jerking wildly. The room isn't the same anymore. The furniture is gone. The mirrors are gone. Instead, the space has twisted into a single, long hallway. The walls seem closer, the ceiling lower. His breath hitches. He stumbles back. And then, something moves at the far end. A shadow. Not cast by anything. Not attached to anything. It crawls. Thick, liquid darkness, stretching and shifting like ink spilled in water. Who's there? Silence. The shadow moves closer. The video begins to distort. The screen warps. Black static spreads across the image. His chest tightens. He stumbles back and collides with something solid. His stomach drops. The hallway behind him is gone. He spins, heart hammering. The corridor he just walked through has vanished. Walls surround him on every side. Trapped. His breath comes in shallow gasps. The shadow moves faster now. The static deepens. The image glitches. He tries to scream. The screen flashes white. The audio cuts. Blackness. The feed ends abruptly. Silence lingers. Then words fade onto the screen. The YouTuber was never seen again. A pause. Then, from the void, a new sound emerges, a low, steady hum. The screen flickers back to life. A road. A van. The mystery machine moves slowly down a darkened street. And at the very end of the block, the house is waiting. The street was unnaturally quiet. Fog clung to the pavement, swallowing the streetlights. The mystery machine moved slowly, its headlights cutting through the haze. The houses lining the road were ordinary small, suburban, untouched by time. Except for the house at the very end. It stood alone, featureless and cold. Its walls were smooth, gray, and wrong. No cracks, no signs of aging, as if it had never been built, only placed there. It did not belong. Inside the van, Fred tightened his grip on the wheel. Daphne leaned forward, eyes locked on the structure. That's it? The house from the video? Velma scrolled through her tablet, frowning. According to city records, this lot has been vacant for decades. No permits, no owners, nothing. This house doesn't exist. Shaggy folded his arms. Then, what are we looking at? No one answered. The van came to a stop. The air was colder now. The kind of cold that wasn't from wind, but something deeper, settling beneath the skin. They stepped onto the pavement. The house loomed in front of them, blank and uninviting. Daphne stopped a few steps ahead of the group, staring up at the walls. Fred pressed his palm against the surface. It was smooth and cold. Daphne ran her fingertips along it. No seams, no cracks. It's like it was made in one piece. Velma crouched, inspecting the foundation. That's impossible. Every structure has faults. This one doesn't. It's almost like it wasn't built at all. Shaggy took a step back. Creepy house, no way in. That means we should leave, right? Scooby whined, tail between his legs. Velma checked her tablet again. The YouTuber's last location was inside this house. But if there's no entrance, Daphne inhaled sharply. Her hand, still resting on the wall, was sinking in. She yanked it back, eyes wide. The surface rippled where she had touched it, like disturbed water. Fred stepped closer. Velma hesitated, then pressed her hand forward. It slipped through. Not through a door, not through an opening through the wall itself. Fred exhaled. That's the entrance. Daphne flexed her fingers, shaking off the chill lingering on her skin. It felt cold, like stepping into ice. Shaggy shook his head. Nope, that is not normal, and I'm not going in there. Fred turned to him. The YouTuber went in. He never came out. If we don't go after him, we'll never know what happened. Velma adjusted her glasses. No splitting up, a long silence. Then, one by one, they stepped forward and disappeared. Darkness. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just a void. Then, a dim glow flickered to life, revealing a corridor stretching impossibly far. The walls were smooth, identical to the exterior. The air felt heavy. Daphne shivered, arms wrapped around herself. Where are we? Velma flicked on her flashlight. The beam wavered before steadying. Fred scanned their surroundings. I think we're inside. Shaggy let out a shaky laugh, gripping Scooby's fur. You think? Scooby whined softly. Velma ran a hand over the floor. No seams, no boards, no construction marks. This place wasn't built, it was formed. Fred turned back toward where they had entered. His stomach dropped. The entrance was gone. Where there had been a way out, there was now only more hallway. He forced his voice to stay steady. Guys? Daphne followed his gaze, her breath catching. Velma turned sharply. The exit was gone. The way they had come in no longer existed. Shaggy's voice cracked. No. That's not possible. Fred squared his shoulders. We need to figure this place out. Velma swept her flashlight along the walls. The air felt different, pressing inward, almost alive. Then, a noise. A slow, dragging shuffle. Daphne stiffened. Fred's hands clenched into fists. Shaggy gripped Scooby. Velma's voice barely rose above a whisper. We're not alone. Another noise. Closer. Then, something moved at the far end of the hall. A shadow. It slid along the wall, not cast by anything. It stretched it grew. Daphne took a step back. Shaggy's breathing turned ragged. Oh no. Fred's expression hardened. Run. They turned and froze. The hallway behind them was different now. The walls had shifted. The way they had come from no longer existed. The walls shifted. Where an open corridor had once been, there was now only more wall. The same seamless, featureless gray stretching into the distance. Daphne's breathing turned shallow as she turned in a slow circle, searching for any sign of the way they had come. This isn't possible. Velma lifted her flashlight. The beam flickered, struggling against the heavy darkness pressing in around them. The air felt thicker, charged with something unseen. Fred clenched his fists, scanning their surroundings. Nobody panic. We just need to retrace our steps. Shaggy let out a nervous, breathy laugh. Retrace our steps? How? The hallway was behind us, and now it's gone. Scooby whimpered, pressing himself against Shaggy's leg. Velma studied the walls, her fingers running along the impossibly smooth surface. The house is changing. It isn't built like a normal structure. It's reacting to us. Fred turned toward her. Like a maze? Velma nodded slowly. More than that. It's like it's alive. The words sent a cold shiver down Daphne's spine. Shaggy backed up against the wall. Awesome. We're trapped in a haunted, shape-shifting house that doesn't exist. That's great. That's totally great. Daphne exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. We need to move. Standing here won't help. Fred nodded. We stick together. No splitting up. They moved cautiously down the corridor, each step echoing unnaturally. The hallway stretched ahead, impossibly long. No doors. No windows. Just a single, endless path into the unknown. And behind them, something shifted again. They walked for what felt like hours, though the time made no sense. The air seemed to press heavier with every step, like something unseen was coiling around them, watching. Velma stopped suddenly. Wait. The others froze. Velma raised her flashlight, slowly sweeping the beam across the walls. Fred stepped closer. What is it? Velma pointed to the ground. There, drawn in white chalk, was a symbol. A circle, broken by jagged lines cutting through its center. Daphne frowned. That wasn't there before. Shaggy's face paled. Yeah, it was. Daphne's stomach twisted. What do you mean? Shaggy swallowed hard, gesturing to the wall. I drew it. When we first got here, silence fell over them. Fred turned, scanning the hallway behind them. It looked identical to the one ahead. They hadn't been walking forward. They had been looping in circles. Scooby let out a whimper, ears flat against his head. Daphne felt her pulse quicken. We're not getting anywhere. Velma gritted her teeth, her mind racing. This place isn't just shifting. It's controlling where we go. Fred ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. We need a different plan. Shaggy's voice wavered. Like what? Before anyone could answer, a sound, soft, faint. A whisper carried through the air, so low it barely reached them. Daphne's breath caught. Did you hear that? Fred's eyes narrowed. The whisper came again. Velma turned sharply, her flashlight beam flickering. It's coming from down the hall. Shaggy groaned. And that means we're going toward it, doesn't it? Fred squared his shoulders. If someone's here, we need to find them. Daphne glanced at Velma. Or something. Shaggy hesitated, then sighed heavily. Yep, I hate this. Scooby whined, but followed. They walked forward. The whisper grew louder. The hallway seemed to stretch, bending impossibly. And then, something moved. A shadow, stretching along the far wall. Not cast by anything. Not connected to anything. Daphne took a step back. The shadow twisted, growing unnaturally, shifting like ink spilling through water. Fred's jaw tightened. Who's there? No answer. The whisper came again. Not in English. Not in any language they knew. The air turned icy cold. The flashlight beams flickered violently. Velma's breath hitched. Something's happening. Shaggy grabbed Scooby's collar, pulling him close. "This is the part where we run, right?" Fred took a step forward, jaw clenched. "Stay together." Then, the lights went out. A rush of air swept past them, like something moving at impossible speed. Daphne gasped, her fingers grasping for anything solid. Fred's voice cut through the darkness. "Velma? Shaggy?" Velma's voice was right next to him. "I'm here." Shaggy's breathing was rapid. "I can't see anything," Scooby whimpered. Then, the lights snapped back on. The hallway was different again. The floors were wooden now. The walls were covered in old, peeling wallpaper. The hallway was no longer endless. Now, it had a door at the far end. A single wooden door, slightly ajar. And from within, the whisper continued. Daphne shuddered. "It's leading us somewhere." Fred exhaled, then nodded. "Let's find out where." The door stood open at the end of the hallway, the whispering sound drifting from the darkness beyond. Fred stepped forward, pressing his hand against the wood. It was cold, far colder than the air around them. The boards beneath his feet creaked as he pushed it open. The whispering stopped. Beyond the threshold, a staircase spiraled downward into the dark. The walls here weren't smooth like the rest of the house. They were stone, old, uneven. Daphne swallowed hard. "This house isn't supposed to have a basement." Velma ran her fingers along the carvings etched into the stone walls. "Maybe it doesn't." Shaggy's voice shook. Nope. Stairs into the void? That's a trap. We all know it's a trap." Scooby whimpered, pressing against him. Fred's jaw tightened. "It's the only way forward." A cold gust of air drifted up from below. It smelled damp, old. Something was waiting down there. Velma inhaled sharply. "These carvings?" They matched Dr. Wu's notes. He wrote about places that weren't built but found structures that shift, like they're alive. Fred nodded. "Then let's find out what's at the bottom." One by one, they stepped into the dark. The stone steps stretched downward farther than they should have. They walked for minutes, yet the staircase never ended. The air grew thick, pressing against them, making every breath heavier. Shaggy glanced back. Guys? Shouldn't we have hit the bottom by now?" Velma checked her watch. "We've been walking for 5 minutes." Daphne's stomach twisted. "That's impossible." Fred turned, the entrance was gone. Shaggy's breathing turned shallow. No, that's bad." Velma's voice was tight. "We're trapped again." Scooby whimpered. Fred clenched his fists. "Then we keep moving." At last, the steps ended. They stepped into a massive underground space. The walls were black stone, slick like glass, reflecting their flashlights in distorted shapes. The ceiling stretched into darkness, and in the center, a pedestal. On it sat an amulet. Velma stepped closer, heart pounding. "That's not the Jade Eyes amulet." Fred's pulse quickened. "Then what is it?" The amulet was identical in shape, but completely black. Its carvings were sharp, almost cutting into the stone itself. Daphne reached toward it. Velma grabbed her wrist. "Wait!" Daphne stopped, eyes wide. Velma's voice was barely a whisper. "This isn't a relic, it's a seal." Fred frowned. "A seal for what?" A low rumble shook the ground beneath them. The walls moved. Shadows stretched, peeling away from the stone like something waking up. Shaggy stumbled back. Nope. "I don't want to know," Scooby whimpered. Fred turned, his voice urgent. "Back away." Slowly, the whispering returned, but now it came from every direction. Daphne's breath hitched. "We're not alone." Velma gritted her teeth. "We never were." Then, the shadows opened their eyes, and the lights went out. The darkness was alive. A weight pressed down on them, thick and suffocating, as if the air itself had turned solid. The whispering grew louder, shifting between words too warped to understand. The shadows moved, not like shifting light, but like something pulling free from the walls. Fred's breathing slowed. His hand clenched into a fist, instinct screaming at him to stay calm, to find a way out. His flashlight flickered, barely cutting through the dark. A gust of air rolled through the chamber, chilling his skin. It wasn't a breeze. It was something breathing. Velma stood frozen, her fingers still gripping Daphne's wrist. Her eyes, wide behind her glasses, locked onto the amulet. Daphne shivered, pulling back slowly, her pulse hammering. The cold from the object had seeped into her bones the moment she had reached for it. Shaggy staggered backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. His eyes darted to the shifting shadows, his voice stuck in his throat. Scooby growled low, his fur standing on end. The shape in the darkness moved. A mass of stretching, writhing blackness uncoiled from the walls. It didn't walk. It flowed, slithering across the stone like spilled ink. Dozens of eyes, not human, not animal, blinked open within its formless body, watching them with a hunger that wasn't alive. Fred's grip on the flashlight tightened. The whispering became words. You should not have come. The voice wasn't a voice. It echoed inside their heads, deep and hollow, like something speaking through them instead of to them. Velma took a sharp breath, stepping forward, her mind racing through every legend she had read. It's not just a ghost. Her voice trembled, but her focus remained sharp. This thing is trapped here. The shadow twisted unnaturally. The whispering overlapped, voices merging, distorting, filling the air with a sound that shouldn't exist. Fred inched closer to Velma, his mind already formulating a plan. Trapped by what? Velma turned toward the pedestal, her hands clenching at the sight of the amulet. The seal. This amulet isn't a relic, it's a lock. And we're standing in its prison. Daphne's stomach dropped. Her fingers curled into fists. Then, who put it here? A pause. The whispering slowed, just for a moment. The eyes shifted, focusing entirely on her. Then the voice returned, louder this time. The ones who came before. Shaggy let out a strangled gasp. I hate that answer. I hate that answer. Scooby whimpered, tail tucked tight against his body. Fred exhaled, heart pounding. Then what happens if the amulet is removed? The shadows seethed. The walls shuddered. The voices merged into a single resonating whisper. We will be free. The temperature plummeted. The torches that had once dimly lit the chamber died out, swallowed by the darkness. The entire room seemed to breathe, as if whatever had been sealed here for centuries was already pushing against the edges of its prison. Velma's mind reeled. If this was true, if the amulet was a seal rather than a key, then the YouTuber had never stolen something powerful. He had stolen something dangerous. Daphne took a slow step toward the pedestal, gaze locked on the darkened amulet. If this thing gets out, what does it want? The shadows lurched. The voice rippled through the stone. To be remembered. Velma's breath caught. The house wasn't built. It was created, a memory, given shape. The whisper turned harsh. You do not understand. A deafening crack split through the air. The chamber trembled, stone shifting beneath their feet. The pedestal shook violently, as if the amulet itself was fighting to stay in place. Fred grabbed Velma's arm. We need to move, now. But the room was changing. The walls began to melt, the stone warping, stretching, becoming doorways. Hundreds of doorways. They opened into nothing. Endless, yawning voids that led to places that shouldn't exist. Daphne took a sharp step back. What is this? Velma's fingers dug into her notebook, her mind grasping at an explanation. The house isn't just shifting, it's unraveling. Shaggy bolted for the nearest exit, but the moment he reached the doorway, he froze. His body locked in place. His reflection stared back at him from inside the doorway. Only, it wasn't his reflection. It was smiling. Fred grabbed his collar, yanking him back just as the door swallowed the copy. Shaggy stumbled away, shaking. Nope, nope, nope. Scooby barked frantically, his claws scraping against the stone. Fred turned to Velma, urgency in his voice. How do we stop this? Velma's hands trembled. We have to put the amulet back. Daphne's breath hitched. Then what happens? Velma swallowed hard. I don't know. The whispering rose to a scream. The shadows descended. And the lights went out. The darkness swallowed everything. It wasn't just an absence of light. It was an emptiness, pressing in from all sides, suffocating and alive. The whispering had grown into a violent howl, rushing through the chamber like a storm that had been waiting for centuries to be unleashed. Fred gripped Velma's arm, his heart pounding against his ribs. He could feel her fingers trembling, the weight of her realization sinking into her. Daphne pressed against the pedestal, shielding herself from the unnatural wind that threatened to pull them all apart. Shaggy crouched low, arms wrapped around Scooby, his breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. The dog whined, ears flattened against his head, his claws scraping desperately against the shifting stone beneath him. The walls of the chamber warped, their edges breaking apart like pieces of shattered glass. Beyond them, nothing, only an endless void that stretched into the unknown. Velma forced herself to think, we have to restore the seal. If we don't. The whispering voice roared, cutting through the space with pure rage. You do not understand. The chamber shuddered, and for a moment, everything twisted. Fred's vision blurred, his mind lurching sideways. The room shifted, no longer stone, but wood. The musty scent of old wallpaper filled the air. The walls of the underground prison replaced by the hallways of the house above. They were back inside, but something was wrong. The house wasn't just shifting, it was repeating. The hallway stretched infinitely, identical copies of themselves appearing down its length, over and over. Shaggy let out a strangled gasp. Okay, I officially hate this place, Scooby whimpered. Velma stared ahead, her mind racing. It's trying to rewrite itself. Daphne turned sharply. Rewrite what? Velma gritted her teeth. The house isn't real. It's a memory, something that was erased, but still lingers. The seal kept it trapped, forced it to be forgotten. But when the amulet was taken, the memory started returning. Fred's jaw tightened. Then how do we make it forget again? Velma clutched the amulet, staring at the markings carved into its surface. They weren't just symbols. They were instructions. Her stomach twisted. We have to leave it behind. Daphne blinked. What? Thick, liquid darkness, stretching and shifting like ink spilled in water. Who's there? Silence. The shadow moves closer. The video begins to distort. The screen warps. Black static spreads across the image. His chest tightens. He stumbles back and collides with something solid. That's not all. If we reset it, we won't remember any of this. A heavy silence fell over them. Daphne's hands curled into fists. You mean? Velma swallowed hard. We'll forget the house, the YouTuber, everything. The moment the seal is restored, it'll be erased from our minds, like it never existed. Fred looked down at the amulet in her hands. The whispering grew frantic. We will not be forgotten again. The shadows lunged. Fred grabbed Velma's wrist. Do it. Velma didn't hesitate. She slammed the amulet back onto the pedestal. The house screamed. Everything tore apart. Walls folded inward like collapsing paper. The floors vanished beneath them, sending them tumbling through a void of twisting, fragmented space. The whispering turned to silence. And then, nothing. The sky was clear. The street was empty. The mystery machine was parked by the side of the road, its engine quietly humming in the night air. Fred blinked, gripping the steering wheel. Daphne stretched in the passenger seat, rubbing her temples as if waking from a long nap. Velma adjusted her glasses, staring at the screen of her tablet. Shaggy yawned loudly, cracking his knuckles as Scooby dozed beside him. Everything was normal. Fred frowned. "Why are we parked here?" Velma tilted her head. "I don't remember." Daphne looked out the window. The street was empty, lined with suburban homes, but something felt off. Shaggy rubbed his neck. Man, I feel like I just had the weirdest dream." Scooby murmured something in agreement, still half asleep. Fred exhaled. "Let's go." He put the van in gear, pulling away from the curb. As they drove down the quiet street, none of them noticed the empty lot they were passing. A space where no house had ever stood. A space that no one remembered